And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominick, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, would a Marvel Star Wars crossover movie incite a violent nerd mob to storm the Capitol building? And with daylight saving time causing work tardiness and even traffic accidents, would it be considered a symbolic protest if I left my car right here on the sidewalk? And now, the podcast host who avoids daylight saving time fatigue like a weasel dodging a cobra strike, Pete Dominick!
That is absolutely right. Just like a weasel dodging a cobra strike, Pico. Thank you very much for getting us started. Great to have you back. Glad you are feeling better. Excellent show to start off your week today. Maura Quint joins me for a fascinating conversation and then a very disagreeable conversation because people have been asking for more of those here with former Republican Congressman from Georgia, Doug Collins, and he joins me here on the podcast today, and we covered a lot with him. Maura Quint, Doug Collins coming your way. A whole big bunch of news in the news segment, but I'm very happy to have you here, and I hope that you had a good weekend, and thank you very much for subscribing to the show. If you haven't, sign up now, standupwithpete.com. Anytime you want, and welcome to new subscribers. I want to say thank you to all new subscribers that have signed up over the past couple of weeks, including Kwang Yu Liu. Welcome to you. Also, thank you to Tom Herman for editing his pledge upwards. Same thing with Dustin B. Very generous of you, as well as Barrett Coles. Thank you very much, Barrett. Good to hear from you, buddy. So did Iris Wiggins. So many people decided, you know what? I'm going to pay more than $5 for my subscription, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Kelly Weibel with a very generous raise. Diane Cecere as well. Also, welcome to Robert Jackson. Deborah Spengner has signed back up. Tanya Mertland. I don't know, sometimes people's credit cards expire and they sign back up to be subscribers. Welcome to Robert Loringer, Katie Casada, Amanda Brooks, Keith Desa. They both edited their pledge upward as well. Thank you guys very, very much. If I missed anybody, I'm real sorry. Just wanted to give a few shout outs here at the beginning. A lot of nice messages being sent to me as well about how much the show means to you and how long you've been listening, how much you rely on it. Thank you for those. And off the top of my head, I'm thinking of Shannon White, Kim Nyborg, and my friend Cassie in Las Vegas. Really nice messages just over the past week. Thank you guys. You are the absolute best. It makes me feel so purposeful, driven, and inspired to do the program every day. I can't thank you enough for all of your support. Got a hell of a show for you. I hope you had a good weekend. And yeah, let's talk about that daylight saving just for a moment here, because I saw this great New York Times article by Amelia Nierenberg titled "Fall Back, Spring Ahead? How about neither?" experts say. She writes, on Sunday, most people in the United States will spring their clocks forward by 1 hour. Of course, yesterday, heralding the end of standard time with its brighter mornings and darker evenings and the beginning of daylight saving time. But according to polls, most Americans don't like changing the clocks twice a year, and the days after the switch are often a turbulent time for public health. Pete Coe referenced that right there in the opening, and she writes that as a result, a growing cadre of scientists, politicians, and business leaders have been urging the country to stop changing the clocks altogether and to pick one permanent time system. The only problem is nobody can agree on which one to use. Now, the arguments for permanent daylight saving time are that darker mornings and brighter evenings would be a boon for public health, and it's not been apparently well studied, she writes, in part because it's near impossible to conduct a national experiment on the topic. In fact, many related studies are limited and sometimes contradictory, she says. Nevertheless, a loud group of business leaders, academics, and bipartisan senators have suggested that a permanent switch to daylight saving time would be beneficial for most people in the United States. They'd be happier, more productive, well-rested, and some limited research seems to support that claim. In one 2017 study from Denmark, scientists analyzed a psychiatric database of more than 185,000 people from 1995 to 2012. What did they find? Well, that the fall transition to standard time was associated with an 11% increase in depressive episodes, an effect that took 10 weeks to dissipate. The spring switch, by contrast, had no similar effect. There are also economic interests, and lobbyists and retail and leisure industries have argued that more light in the evenings would give consumers more time to spend money through shopping or golfing, for instance. And there's so much more to say about this. I highly recommend that you read this article. The arguments for permanent standard time, including from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, say that standard time with its brighter mornings is more naturally aligned with the progression of the sun and therefore the body's natural clock. However, the studies in favor of this argument similarly do not prove cause and effect. So that's really interesting to mention here, I think, and that's why I did, because I try to be interesting and learn stuff with you, that I didn't realize there was such a controversy and that it was such a serious issue, like a life and death issue, and that people had such varying range of opinions on it. But the movement to enact permanent daylight saving time is gaining momentum. More than a dozen states have passed legislation that would adopt permanent daylight saving time and now are waiting for a federal green light. Although the debate is raging, there's not likely to be a bill from the president's desk anytime soon, she writes. So for now, don't forget to switch your clocks on Sunday and follow some expert-backed tips to keep the grogginess at bay. I had no idea we had so much to learn about daylight savings time. I'm a little embarrassed. But yeah, apparently that debate has been raging and there's not a lot of settled research on it. All right, well, a lot more to talk about in the news. Like I said, I hope you had a great weekend. I had a good weekend, and I'm very happy to be here with you and you with me, even though I'm just sitting here in my solar-powered shed alone here. I feel your presence because so many of you listen every day and I hear from you. So let's do it. Let's talk about what happened in the last 24 hours of news. It's time for the last 24. All right, well, it's Monday, so it's more like the last 72. I'll give you clips from the Sunday shows and more. I guess two big stories that broke kind of late last night were the sad passing of a legendary, respected actor, William Hurt, at the age of 72. And so a lot of people were reacting to that last night. And then a lot of other people were reacting to the fact that the arguably greatest football quarterback of all time, Tom Brady, who announced that he'd retire at the end of last season, has come out and said that he is going to actually play again. He's coming back to play another season for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I guess he put a post up on social media that says, I have not made enough money and I can't leave the spotlight. Now, I think he really likes to play football. If I don't want to read into it, I think the guy is one of those people who's addicted to competing in that way. And so there you go. Tom Brady is back. We've lost William Hurt. And there's much more to say in today's news, specifically and most importantly, what is happening in Ukraine. Are we in World War III? Are we headed for World War III? I feel like there's way too much commentary of the phrase World War III. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying I just don't love to hear it. Anyway, on the Sunday shows, you had all the generals, all the politicians, the journalists, the scholars, the think tankers, and so much more. Let's get to some of the headlines out of the invasion of Ukraine. Putin's invasion, Putin's war. Here are your headlines from the last 72 hours. Russia struck a base near the Polish border, killing 35 Ukrainian members of the Ukrainian military. Protesters in Russian-controlled Melitopol, I don't know if I'm saying that right, have demanded the return of their abducted mayor. Convoys carrying weapons into Ukraine are legitimate targets, the Russian officials announced over the weekend. President Zelensky of Ukraine said that 1,300 Ukrainian soldiers had been killed. Russia's stock exchange announced it won't open on Monday. Over the weekend, Russian forces stepped up bombardment aimed at devastating Ukraine's cities and towns. Soldiers fighting apparently street-by-street battles in a Kyiv suburb. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also accusing Russia of commencing a, quote, new stage of terror designed to break citizens' wills. He visited wounded soldiers in a Ukrainian hospital, awarding them medals. I thought that was a pretty powerful video to see. And now cities in the relatively safer western Ukraine have been attacked, creating more insecurity for Ukrainians in that region. The U.S. announced it would send an additional $200 million in weapons and equipment to Ukraine. The chaos of the war could fuel a surge of COVID or other infectious diseases, doctors are warning. Europeans worried about survival are now investing in bunkers and iodine pills, and American voters are seeing Ukraine in an increasingly friendly light. Just a few more of the headlines on Ukraine and all things related to Putin's invasion of that country, which continues to be an absolutely horrible story unfolding hour by hour, minute by minute if you're there. Hard to look away from, and if you're like me, you feel a certain sense of guilt for just doing something enjoyable. And I even snapped at the girls this weekend, at Julia, who was just lying around giving me a hard time or something, complaining that I was asking her to do something. And I was like, at least you're not lying in your home or, worried about being bombarded, or in a subway, worried about being bombed, or, your father had to leave to fight the war. And she was like, I wish you would go fight the war. I'm kidding. She didn't say that. That's horrible. I was just doing one of those, try to give her perspective to motivate her. I'm not sure it worked. Anyway, it is hard to watch, and I watched all the Sunday shows, so you didn't have to. The American-based corporate media was focused on, I think, a fair question, which is what more can the U.S. do? And that belies that they've already maybe not answered the question enough. What has America done? So we've given billions of dollars in aid, obviously, to Ukraine, and worked with other European and international other countries to enforce all kinds of different sanctions and penalties and so much more. So we've done a lot. Some Americans are even going and fighting their veterans. I'll play a clip of some of them for you, although I think the U.S. State Department has asked them to maybe not do that. I've got a headline for you on that as well. But the American-based media was about what more can be done, and obviously a lot of speculation from the analysts and experts and so on about where they see this going. Let's start with Ali Velsh's show on NBC. Velshi on Saturdays and Sundays starts at 8 a.m. It's a 2-hour show. It's great. He always has excellent guests join him. Gary Kasparov was on with him, and he is desperate and arguing, calling on NATO to do more to help defend Ukraine. And he makes a passionate plea for that, even though a lot of people see that as the beginning of what they say, as I mentioned, World War III. Didn't stop old Kasparov on MSNBC yesterday or Saturday morning.
Well, it's hard watching it without crying. So I still can't believe it's 2022. It's 21st century. And we see such acts of such crimes. It's like war crimes on an industrial scale. And yesterday I had an live interview with one of the Ukrainian channels. It was interrupted 6 or 7 times because of the air raid sirens across the country, and they had to announce them just telling people to go to the shelters. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, technically there is no NATO obligation to defend Ukraine, but it's not just about legal obligations. It's about moral obligations. NATO has been built to defend democracy and to promote democracy. And what's happening in Ukraine now, it's not just an Ukrainian invasion anymore. I think Putin is demonstrating to the world that he could do whatever he wants. So it's no longer indiscriminate bombing. It's intentional bombing. They're attacking civilian targets just to spread horror. It's a campaign of terror aimed at Ukrainian brave Ukrainians who are defending their cities. I think what's happening in Mariupol now, it's a message to Kyiv that will happen to you. They use cluster bombs. They use most powerful bombs that only used to destroy underground bunkers, and it's all against civilians. So I think it's a matter of time before some kind of military confrontation happens between NATO forces and Russia, because we're already at World War III. Putin said it many times. He is fighting NATO there. And now we can still engage him on our terms, because the Ukrainian army is fighting and inflicting huge damages to Russian invading forces. And if NATO offers air support, the war could turn around. Otherwise, we'll be waiting for Putin to continue his aggression and forcing us to be engaged on his terms already on NATO soil.
All right, there's Gary Kasparov calling for more involvement from NATO. And now here is former ambassador to the United States, Mike McFaul. I think this guy, I don't know, I generally tend to agree with his point of view on a lot of these things. What do I know? But he was on Velshi as well, and Ali Velshi asked him about when, if ever, will the Russian people get involved. He commented about how Russian mothers were very involved and organized during the war in Chechnya, and their sons were dying, and before that, Afghanistan. And so Mike McFaul talked about the Russian point of view and when, if ever, they might get involved and rise up in any other way.
Yes, Ali, and I was writing about Chechnya, but there was also a big anti-war movement against the war in Afghanistan, including, by the way, from veterans of that war. And, my plea is I don't think, I interact with a lot of Russians every day. I read Russian news media accounts. Some are brainwashed by Putin's propaganda. That is true, those that watch state media, but a lot are not. This war is not popular among the middle classes, among the elites. There's just no, as far as I can see, I don't know of the single person in Moscow, for instance, that supports this war. Maybe the 2 or 3, cronies of Putin, but I don't know of anybody. And so I'm just saying, do something about it. Try. And I realize the dangers. I know he's a dictator. I know the threat of 15 years in jail is real, but this horrific war cannot go on. And it is going to ruin Russia as well. The economy is in a free fall, as you know well, and you've been reporting on. It's going to get a lot worse. There's going to be more sanctions. Many American and Western companies are rightly taking the decisions to pull out on their own. They're not even waiting for sanctions. So it's not only the moral thing to do to try to stop this war. I think it's the self-interested thing to do for Russians today.
All right, let's head over to Meet the Press, where Chuck Todd, plenty of Sunday shows, actually. I think he was on 3 different Sunday shows, had President Biden's national security advisor, a guy named Jake Sullivan, on the show. And Chuck Todd asked him, based on the developments and the upsurgence of more bombing in the West, have they changed their mind on the no-fly zone idea?
Struck 15 miles from the Polish border. Has any of this escalation into trying to destroy supply lines, indiscriminate bombing in the West, has this changed the president's calculus at all about things like a no-fly zone or things like that?
Well, Chuck, the American president has been clear for some time now that there are no U.S. troops currently operating in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine or in western Ukraine, and that we will defend every inch of NATO territory, but U.S. forces will not engage Russian forces inside Ukraine. That remains true today. It remains true on the ground and in the sky. But what we will do is increase and intensify our efforts to supply the Ukrainian defenders with the weapons and security assistance they need to defend themselves. And just yesterday, the president approved an additional $200 million of military assistance to flow rapidly into Ukraine, and we're coordinating the efforts of our allies and partners to do the same thing.
Chuck Todd over on Meet the Press with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. And he also asked them this key question at the end of that interview.
Do you still consider MiGs to be offensive weapons and not defensive weapons?
The military, the Pentagon, sees the MiGs, the fighter jets, as offensive weapons. But the key thing here is that President Biden looked at the assessment of our intelligence community, took the advice of his military commanders, consulted with his NATO allies, and ultimately determined that the cost-benefit analysis did not justify flying fighter planes from a U.S. base in Germany into contested airspace in Eastern Europe. But he also directed us to double down on our efforts to get the Ukrainians advanced capabilities that could achieve a similar purpose.
Well, then you head over to CBS Sunday Morning, and Margaret Brennan had the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Kuleba on, and she asked him this along that same issue in question about the fighter jet planes.
It was on this program last Sunday that the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, said the decision by Poland to provide fighter jets to Ukraine gets a green light from the United States. Then, days later, President Biden spiked that. Do you have a sense that any country will give you fighter jets?
Well, it's frankly, everything that happened over the fighting jets in the last week is kind of a diplomatic mystery. On the one hand, everyone is ready to do it, but nothing is happening, and we are not getting the planes. It reminds me rather a ping-pong game where every side throws the ball to the other side, and gets it back. We have no time for this kind of ping-pong diplomacy. We need planes to save lives of our people and to put an end to Russian domination in the sky.
The United States argues giving these jets would be escalatory and a risk to NATO, a risk to the United States, and that you have things like drones that work just fine. To my view, this logic is flawed because drones are not escalatory and planes are escalatory. What is the logic behind it? Anti-tank weapons are not escalatory and planes are escalatory. First, what else Russia has to do for everyone to understand that they already reached the peak of escalation? They used, as I mentioned in the beginning, weapons prohibited by international conventions. Why are we so afraid of another escalation? We need to defend ourselves.
Ukrainian Foreign Minister Kuleba, Kuleba, on Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan. Let's head back over to NBC and Meet the Press, where Chuck Todd had an impressive panel with Admiral Stavridis, former Navy Admiral. Then he had Mike McFaul on that show as well. I guess he must be signed to NBC McFaul. And then he had Marie Yovanovitch, and it was a really interesting panel for sure. But here is first Admiral Stavridis on what would happen if they use chemical weapons. Would that be an escalation where we'd have to do something? They're projecting that the Russians are saying Ukraine is going to use chemical weapons. You probably heard talk about this. Fox News is also buying some of these talking points. You get the Tucker Carlson, my old friend Will Cain apparently saying it. So Stavridis on Meet the Press saying, what do you do if they start using chemical weapons? Then do we enforce a no-fly zone? Chuck Todd really wants a no-fly zone, like very badly.
Severe consequences. Clearly, they want to create the ambiguity out there. What's realistic if they use this? What can or should we do?
I think you have to, at that point, consider a no-fly zone. I think is a pretty logical next step, but I'll give you a halfway house. Mm-hmm. That would be going back to the idea of getting fighters in the hands of the Ukrainians. And I get all the puts and takes of that.
So you want Ukraine to do the no-fly zone? They would basically be the ones to do it, not NATO. Is that the goal in this case? Yeah.
And so what you would want to do is put fighters in their hands. And the way to do that, Chuck, would be to have Ukrainian pilots come to NATO, train briefly, and then fly those fighters back.
Why wasn't that the plan in the first place? It seemed the most logical way to do this, to be frank.
It's unclear, but I have full respect for the way the administration has to navigate between our allies and the risks that the ambassador just pointed out. But I think to your question, what do we do if we see chemical weapons? Which, by the way, I agree with Jake Sullivan. When they mention it, it's a tell. Watch for it to come from them. But what should we do? I think you go back to the idea of giving the Ukrainians the tools to implement a very serious no-fly zone. You know, Chuck, sometimes plan B is work harder on plan A. And I think this is one of those cases.
I also really like this piece of commentary from Mike McFaul, especially at the end when he says, listen, you want a no-fly zone? That's World War III, and that's what you're going to get. But you also have to vote for it. If you want to do that, the Congress has to vote for war in that case. And he keeps repeating that day in and day out, and I appreciate it. Here he is.
The fact that the Russians are having to bring in foreign fighters, to me, talk about a tell and a show of weakness. What message should that send to our folks? Like, what should we be reading into this?
Well, obviously, Putin's frustrated. He wouldn't need these people otherwise. And he's striking new cities because he's frustrated. And he looks frustrated on TV when he talks. This is not going the way he wanted to. And that says to our side, if you mean our side, the American side, get into the fight to win. The consequences here are, as we were just talking about, this is not just about Ukrainian freedom. If we lose in Ukraine, we, the liberal democratic world, that sends a powerful message to our competitors, autocratic competitors in the Middle East, in Asia, and it makes our allies and partners in all of those regions nervous. So I, when I talk to the administration, I say, hey guys, A+ for what you've done so far in terms of military assistance, sanctions, and fortifying our NATO allies. But this is just a midterm. You got homework to do, which is to say, I do not think a no-fly zone is the appropriate thing. I think that's a declaration of war, and we should just call it that, and then have the U.S. Congress, by the way, vote on it. That's their job. But anything short of that, we have no excuses but to provide it. Give the Ukrainians what they need to fight this war. I just talked to Zelensky 2 days ago, and that's exactly what he said. He said, you guys are standing on the sidelines. We got it. But give us the tools to win this war on the ground.
Chuck Todd also had Marie Yovanovitch, and she was the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine under Trump. You probably remember what happened to her. Trump tried to disgrace her. She testified against him in the impeachment hearings, and she got a new book out. Chuck Todd asked her about that. He said, what did that mean for Ukraine, that whole deal that Trump had?
Threatening to withhold military aid, which is what got the first impeachment, what made you a household name for a bit, and why you had to testify before Congress. How much did that impact what's happening today?
I think it certainly plays a part. I think Putin saw how Trump viewed Ukraine, and
he just viewed it as a chip. As a chip to negotiate.
And I think that, the release of that transcript showed the world that we had an administration that was ready to trade our national security for personal and political gain, when the president of the United States, of all people, should be working for all of us and our national security.
All right, that's just a check-in on the issue of Ukraine, which dominated, of course, most of the Sunday shows. A lot of good journalism, I think, being done. Smart conversations being had, a lot of different points of view being presented. And then you head over to Crazy Town and Fox, where Maria Bartiromo was on, and she just made stuff up. She just made a whole bunch of stuff up, and it absolutely went viral in terms of the criticism, the faceplant that it was. She drew a lot of heat for claiming that, quote, some people told her that the Biden White House sees Vladimir Putin as a partner, not an enemy. I'll just play a short bit of it and then give you some of the criticism, which I think is fun.
Predetermined outcome here in place, and that is a slow death for Ukraine and President Zelensky as the Russian forces continue to inch closer. With all of these other fatalities that we're talking about, and some people have told me over the weekend that they feel that at the end of the day, this administration does not see Putin as the enemy. They see him as a partner on many issues. They see him as a partner on climate change. They see him as a partner on the Iran deal. When is this administration going to get serious in telling Vladimir Putin, we are done with partnerships? That means no Iran deal, walk away, no more renegotiating on America's behalf, no more products from Russia, truly a pariah for the world. But we're not there yet. And I don't know how many more deaths we are going to be talking about until we get there.
All right, I can't take it anymore. I'm sorry. Completely unhinged. It sounded like she'd been drinking in the morning, and the commentary around that was quick and harsh from across social media of those comments. Stephanie Rule of MSNBC tweeted, for every female business journalist watching this downward spiral, it's like believing in Batman all your life, and then one day realizing he's actually the Joker. Because she was a respected journalist, financial journalist, business journalist at CNBC for a long time, but now she's just a Trump loyalist. David Korn of The Nation writes, this is nuts. Her man Trump sided with Putin over his own intelligence community, and Trump recently praised his moves in Ukraine as genius. A question for medical science, how does her head not explode? Joyce Vance writes, sure, consider Putin a partner if you want to bomb hospitals, kill children, destroy cities, and invade a sovereign country. Just a little bit of the commentary. One more I saw. Let's see. Some people have told me they feel, now that is some ace punditry. Okay, well, that is all I've got for you on Ukraine-related stuff. And audio, you know what? I'm going to cut just now to the boys from SNL. I grabbed a few of their jokes from the Weekend Update. Here is Michael Che and Colin Jost from Saturday Night Live this past weekend.
Russia has passed a fake news law that makes it illegal for any organization to report information that contradicts what the government says, which explains the recent headline, 6'5" Putin not insane.
Russia has responded to sanctions by banning the export of Russian-made cars. But a Russian-made car is just a drunk bear on roller skates. Disney employees were upset that the company took so long to condemn Florida's proposed Don't Say Gay bill, although at Disney they actually don't say gay. They say Timon and Pumbaa.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis seen here waving COVID into the club. He attacked Disney for opposing the state's Don't Say Gay bill, calling the company a woke corporation. Disney denied the claims of wokeness with roughly 90 years of cartoons.
All right, there you go. The boys from Saturday Night Live, Michael Che, Colin Jost, and their writers, who don't really get enough credit. All right, I did find one more clip for you I wanted to share. This is from CBS Face the Nation, who they had the CEO, the chief over at Pfizer, Albert Bourla, who I think he has a Greek accent. He's Greek. He told Margaret Brennan that he thinks the Pfizer vaccine will be needed annually, much of a flu, like the flu shots administered right now. He added he believes a fourth shot of the vaccine will be required to prevent against infections. And of course, Pfizer has an interest in that. But he went on to discuss his company's goal of making a vaccine which will protect against all COVID-19 variants going forward, and one that will last indeed longer. Here is that.
Do you think that we will every fall have to prepare ourselves for a booster shot with COVID, just like we get a flu shot?
I think so. Many variants are coming, and Omicron was the first one that was able to evade in a skillful way the immune protection that we were giving. But also we know that the duration of the protection doesn't last very long. So what we are trying to do, and we are working very diligently right now, it is to make not only a vaccine that will protect against all variants, including Omicron, but also something that can protect for at least a year.
So you've seen some of that data on a fourth dose, a second booster shot. Mm-hmm. You think it will be necessary? It
is necessary, a fourth boost right now. The protection that we are getting from the third, it is good enough, actually quite good for hospitalizations and deaths. It's not that good against infections, but doesn't last very long. Mm-hmm. But we are just submitting those data to the FDA, and then we will see what the experts also will say outside Pfizer.
So the question that was number one on my list, and I think for so many parents, is when will the vaccine be available for those children 5 and under?
Potentially May, if it works. FDA, I'm sure, will do their utmost to review them fast. So, and we will be ready with manufacturing.
All right, there you go. Albert Bourla of Pfizer selling a fourth shot. What do you think of that? Okay, that's all the time I've got for you. I mean, that's a lot of audio. We're like 35 minutes in, and I still got to get to the headlines, rapid fire style, all of the headlines that remain from the most comprehensive news recap in all of daily podcasting, brought to you by stand-up listeners like you and like Pete Coe, who's got yet another original news dump jingle.
Rampaging wayward cow on the road it jumps. It's crossing the yellow line for today's news dump.
Yeah, that is a story out of Southern California where a cow got loose and authorities in L.A. had a really hard time capturing the cow as he was just strolling around on the freeway. Eventually, officials pinned him into a parking lot where I guess the cow went up some stairs and then found a dirt driveway leading to a farm. And then they finally captured the cow. And now they're trying to determine where the hell this cow came from and how they can return it. And that is the theme of today's news dump jingle. Good job, Pete Coe. Now on to some more important stories, like this one out of Alabama, where they joined Georgia and now 20 other states in getting rid of concealed carry permits. So now if you're in Alabama, you're no longer going to be required to hold a permit to conceal and carry a handgun in the state after their governor there signed a bill effectuating the change into law. Alabama now becoming the 22nd state to not require a permit to conceal and carry a firearm, according to the Pew Research Organization. Some police spoke out against the bill. Surprise, surprise. They said the bill doesn't comply with common sense. We're not anti-Second Amendment. It couldn't be further from the truth, but that's, cops don't want that. They don't want people carrying concealed. And I agree with them on that. Makes it really hard. I don't want to give police officers more power and citizens less power necessarily, but it definitely it leads, it's going to, I feel, lead to a lot worse outcomes. You're going to have a lot less vigilantes and more people accidentally getting killed because the cops think they're the bad guy. Speaking of guns, crime labs have shredded Kyle Rittenhouse's firearm. Apparently, video obtained by the NBC affiliate in Wisconsin shows officials with the crime lab there shredding the AR-15 style rifle after feeding it into a machine on February 25th. Pieces of the rifle could be seen dropping into a bucket beneath the shredder, and now they're going to sell them on eBay. No, I'm kidding. They're not doing it. I hope. I just thought that was going to be the next line in that story. Former President Obama has tested positive for COVID-19. He shared it on Twitter yesterday saying, I just tested positive for COVID. Had a scratchy throat for a couple of days. I'm feeling fine otherwise. Michelle and I are grateful to be vaccinated and boosted. And she tested negative. Reminder to get vaccinated if you haven't already, even as cases go down. I don't know why I broke into the impression halfway through me reading his tweet. Thousands rallied across Europe in protests over Russia-Ukraine war. Iran says it fired missiles near the U.S. consulate in Iraq in retaliation for an Israeli strike in Syria that killed 2 members of the Iranian National Guard. The state of Missouri is now seeking to ban terminating life-threatening ectopic pregnancy, so they're going to make it harder for a woman who has a life-threatening situation to terminate their pregnancy. It's just, it's hard to believe, but I got another headline to mention about that coming up in my conversation with Maura Quint. The State Department is now telling foreign fighters, U.S. citizens not to go and fight in Ukraine. ABC News' Martha Raddatz actually was in Ukraine interviewing some foreign fighters, including a British guy and an American guy. I highly recommend you go watch that, because that's a weird thing, I think, to go fight another war. But I don't know if you're trained for it. I mean, just one of the guys is a 2-year-old kid, and he went and fought in this war. But I guess this is what he believes in, and maybe we could talk about that sometime. A new poll says most Americans oppose laws prohibiting elementary school LGBTQ lessons like these Don't Say Gay laws in Florida. The United Kingdom is going to pay residents £350 a month to house Ukrainian refugees. How about that? That's an interesting story. We should do that. I say we should also do something like that in America for not only Ukrainian refugees, but others as well. An American journalist, Brent Renaud, was shot and killed in Ukraine over the weekend. Terrible news. First American journalist that I've heard of dying in this conflict, or any since Syria that I can recall. Nearly 2/3 of Americans are now willing to pay more at the pump in order to punish Russia, according to a new poll. 77% of respondents supported sanctions on Russian oil and gas. Only 23% opposed them in a new published poll by CBS News. Oh, and speaking of interesting polls, how about this one? Viewers of CNN and MSNBC were less likely to say they contracted COVID than people who mainly rely on Fox News and conservative media for information, according to a new Axios Ipsos poll that showed a significant driver of opinion as people's news source, with Fox News and conservative outlet readers differing substantially from MSNBC and CNN viewers. How about that for a news dump story? Yeah, well, the end of the music, so I'm going to wrap it up. I didn't get Ava out of here in the shed tonight because I ran pretty late, and so we don't have the good news segment, but we are going to try to do it every night that we can, every day that we can. So if you've got good news stories, even if they're including like your own personal stories, if you got like something amazing that happened, we'll take it, because the whole point of the news segment, or news in general, reminder, I like to say this from time to time, is these are the things that aren't normal. These are the aberrations. These are the bad things. Most things are good. Most planes land. We only talk about the ones that don't, because that's the news. And so tell me your good news anytime you want. standupwithpete@gmail.com. All right, let's get now to my guests. Here we are, 40 minutes into the show. Coming up, I had a not contentious, but totally disagreeable conversation with former Republican Doug Collins. I think I don't know what you're gonna think about that, actually. I'm interested to hear. I'm always trying to have different types of folks on the show, but you can decide what you think of that and let me know. But first, a wide-ranging, at times absurd, at times really poignant, and then very serious and thoughtful at the end conversation with Maura Quint. We seem to always figure it out every week, and this week is, I think, no exception. I hope you like this. I think you will. I think it's a great way to start off the week. We had some laughs. We had some interesting conversation, and I think that it's great for everybody. Another cathartic, great talk with Maura Quint, who is a writer, hilarious writer. She is an activist. You know all her credits. Read all about her. Listen to the podcast that she's now co-hosting, My So-Called Book Club, and listen to her. Read her, follow her on Twitter at Behind Your Back. Here we go with the theme song by Pete Coe.
When regressive taxation has gone too far and your Bloody Mary's just not up to par, it's Maura Mondays.
Yeah, that's right. Maura Mondays, Maura Quint. Very excited when I get to talk to you, and I have a lot of things to talk with you about. And did you spring ahead? Did you turn the clocks?
I'm staring at several clocks that have not been sprung.
Oh.
I like to do it in I like to surprise myself, basically. It's really fun if you just spend 2 or 3 days, maybe even a week, just being like, is that the right time? Did I change that one?
It's
I'm not
so
sure.
annoying. Every time you realize it's wrong, it's annoying. You must change them right away. Why do you have...
Well, I have to relearn how to do it. Like the one in my oven, I don't know how to change the oven clock. It's not there's no button that says clock. Every time I have to figure it out.
Some type of old-timey oven? What are you talking about? Your microwave?
I guess so. No, my clock. Oh, my microwave is also wrong. I'm staring at both of them. Nothing that can bring me food can tell me the correct time.
Well, that's good. You'll eat later. Is that a thing?
That is a good thing for me, actually. Although when I figure it out, I'll be like, oh, I thought it was dinner, and so I ate, but then now it's dinner, so I guess I have to eat again.
Fine. It's a fine excuse to have another meal, is what I say.
Hobbit it up. Yeah, that's going to be great.
You tweeted this. You tweeted at Behind Your Back. You tweeted, my kids just got excited because the clock I always forget is in their room was the right time again. So in this case, you never even changed that clock back in the fall.
I fully forgot that they have a digital clock in their room. It just escaped my mind. But this morning, my youngest was like, wait, what time is it now? And I'm like, it's 10. And he ran into his bedroom. He's like, it's right. It was like Santa had come. It was wonderful for these, nice little Jewish kids who don't know from Santa. So I feel like I'd done something for them.
That is, I think that you have to get ahead of that. I think the
time fairy had come for them once more.
The time fairy, how is that not a screenplay, a novel, a series? The Time Fairy. I was driving with Julia today and her friend, and she's like, dude, your clock is wrong, because that's how she talks. And I was like, oh, yeah? Boom, boom, boom. While I was driving, I reset that clock. I was so quick, and I just looked at her, and I was like, no, it's right. We talk.
She must love you. Yeah.
We talk
what
like
a
that.
nice relationship.
That's how we speak. So I don't know how to talk about daylight saving time. You and I were talking about it. There's a whole New York Times article about it today with arguments for and against, and we can't really go into them. But all I know is we're springing ahead. Spring is here, Maura. It's right around the corner, and I'm very excited about it. I'm feeling very excited. How are you feeling about spring?
I went skiing today.
No, you did. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. You've been wanting to go all winter, and you've been talking about it, and there you go. Oh, great. How was it?
That's how I feel about spring. I decided to to enjoy the cold and snow. It was fantastic. It was great. It was wonderful because it snowed yesterday, so it wasn't icy, and then it was sunny and lovely out. It was perfect.
I am so happy to hear that. And do you know, and I think people forget that they're still skiing right into, in some places, mid-April, and in other places, even early May in the Rockies. But you can ski in Vermont, and I'm planning to ski right up to the end this year.
See, I need to take a trip to Vermont, because this place in central Pennsylvania, which is, peak skiing. If you want to ski, you want to go to the middle of a state like Pennsylvania that has really icy, miserable weather all the time, and mountains that really aren't that high. It's fantastic.
Well,
but we did it.
You did it. And
it closes next week. So this was like the last chance to get away.
Well, very exciting. Anything else spring related? I mean, that sounds like a winter thing, in fact.
That is a winter thing. That's what I was trying to say. I'm like not prepared for spring in the slightest. I'm fully still in winter gear. I'm
really?
like, yeah.
When you say gear, you mean clothing? Do you have a changeover that you're about to do with your wardrobe?
Oh, God, no. No, I wear the same thing all year round, no matter what. Like, I know. Without question. I have perfected people. Like, I think people figured this out during the pandemic when they started working from home and they were just like, oh, I don't have to wear pants and I can wear the same thing every day. And I'm like, I've been doing that for years, bitches. Like, as a woman. Did you
say that actually to anyone? Did you say I've been doing it for years, bitches, to anybody that just.
Probably. I don't know. I say that a lot, Pete. You can't ask me to.
Yeah, fair enough.
Question how often I swear at people.
Complete strangers.
My dominance. Yeah, no. Like that's just walking into a Target.
So I interrupted your thesis.
Oh yeah. So I just buy like summer. I think they're called like sundresses, basically. Like there's lots of styles of sundresses. They're super comfy. I just wear sundresses all year, and then in the winter I put leggings underneath and like a sweatshirt on top, and in the summer. No leggings and maybe like a light cardigan. There you go. Same outfit all the time.
So the sundress is the same fabric. When I think of sundress, I think of what I think is probably most people know that, but I think of very thin material. That's why it's called.
It's just like a basic cotton kind of dress. But then, you wear like, it's fine. I mean, for 1 second, I was going to say, I probably wouldn't wear that skiing. And then I was like, no, that's exactly what I wear skiing. I just put a turtleneck underneath it.
No. And so you then will wear tight. You never wear pants.
I stopped wearing pants. I stopped wearing pants because I started gaining weight and I was unhappy. And I told myself, you'll lose it soon. Don't worry. You're not going to buy up a size. And then that just became never. That just eliminated pants from my world completely. Do you want
to get back in pants?
I want to get back in the size where I can buy the pants and not feel ashamed of the size I'm buying in pants. That's really what it comes down to. The pants themselves, I don't know. Who cares? I don't need pants. Like leggings are fantastic. I'm sorry for dudes not having leggings. They are so comfortable.
I wear leggings when I run. And
there you go.
Today, one of Julia's friends was over and I just like attacked her with no warning. I go, I wear leggings when I run and I don't care what anybody thinks. And
this was your hello?
No, not right at hello.
To a teenage girl friend that was
all the girls' friends that are, know me pretty well. And even when they don't, I kind of start with humor. And they're at the beginning, they're like, what is going on with this guy? But then they kind of stay on their toes and they either sink or swim with us. It's kind of almost like a rule. Like when you come into this house and you see me, I'm going to joke around. And I taught this young girl today about improv. She had no idea. And I go, it's just, and I explained it to her. And then we started over and it was wonderful. She was great.
Wow.
Yeah, we did a little improv. And the girls, my girls were raised with it, so it's different. And I want it to always be that way in the house, kind of. It's a little obnoxious, but it makes life more fun.
You know what a DILF is, of course.
Yeah, I'm not that.
No, you're a Dilla, I think. It's more like dad I'd like to avoid, probably, is how that goes around.
Oh, I thought it was because of my own insecurities. I thought it was dad I would like to be friends with, but wouldn't fuck. No, some of them definitely, it's like, ugh. Annoying, this guy's he's kind of like messing with me. But like when I'm driving these girls around in the car,
I don't approve of what you're doing.
Go ahead.
Pete. I don't approve. Like you're setting young impressionable girls out on a path to wind up where at Second City. Like what are you doing? This is terrible for them. This is like, why would you do this?
I think that it's a type of humor and a skill that every person should have available to them, or at least understand that it's available to them. And I take it upon myself to introduce it to the teens. It's not just something I do with the girls. I mean, Julia and both Ava and Julia have boys over here all the time. It's the exact same type of thing. And once they're in, it's hilarious and we have a good time.
So it's the girls, yes, and the boys.
That's right. You nailed it.
Okay.
So who taught you? Who taught you to be quick and funny on your feet? Was it,
sadness, I think?
It was sadness.
Loneliness. hating people around me. I don't know. The old-fashioned way, Pete.
That is,
some of us get there naturally.
I don't have any comeback for that. That is, that's what you call a bit ender.
Yeah,
just knowing to move on because you can't top that. That's hilarious. And also, sad. I do it for me. But
that's right.
I have to exist. I can't be that like awkward dad where they're like, "Hello, Mr. Dominic." I'm like, our generation, by the way, I feel like never calls. I mean, I'm sure it's regional and cultural, but rarely do we do Mr. and Mrs. for the girls' friends.
Oh yeah, that one's been weird the whole time, and like. But the young kids, because my kids are much younger than yours, like they don't want to call me by my first name. I don't, at least here and in this, they just don't. So the most they do will be calling me like, Luke's mom or something. But they like, and sometimes they'll stretch, and I don't have the same last name as my kids, so like they'll try for a Mrs. Sometimes. I'm also not married, so it's very like I just sort of nod and smile to whatever they say.
Do you feel like there is, for me, I feel like it creates a more sense of familiarity and a more peer-like relationship, which I think which is good to feel like your kids' friends trust you and they can kind of come to you. And I had a few adults that I could come to, but only a few that were outside of my parents. I mean, I had a pretty good relationship with them. But the Mr. and Mrs., like there was always a real barrier between me and my friend's parents, which is maybe that's the way it's supposed to be, but I just never wanted that.
Yeah, it's not something that like I want either. It's not something I would never tell a kid to call me Ms. Quint or anything like that. Like never. That would be strange. And at the same time, the way that some of my kids' friends already are, I also then sort of want them to know that I am still in charge. And
sure.
There is, because even at like 8, some of them are just like barging in. They're just talking all sorts of shit to me, just like going through the cupboards. And it's just like, all right, buddy, settle down. Like ask for a glass of juice, you little brat. But, I don't say that at all.
Well, no, but you always say, you got to set those boundaries. But now you get the opportunity to do it. I get the opportunity to do it in a comedic way. Like I'll be like to... And
I do it in a comedic way too.
Yeah, I mean, you do it with humor. You just ping them really hard, and then they realize, maybe I shouldn't just open the fridge and take shit out. Although I don't care about that either.
No, I don't.
I always loved it when I would be able to go to my friend's house and raid their stuff, and they always had different stuff than you did.
Oh, that's the best. I still have that a little bit. Like
what?
Not with food anymore, but it like grew into if I have particularly. Especially if I have friends who are like, better off than I am, as many of my friends are. It's not hard to be. If I stay at their house, oh God, I love looking at their beauty supplies. Like I love like, what's your skincare regimen like? Ooh, like it's totally ridiculous, but it's the way I used to be about like someone's being like, oh my God, you have 4 different kinds of cereal and 3 of them are sugary. Wow.
Yeah, look, it's just evolving. I mean, that's totally normal, but it goes from the forbidden to what you might be able to afford but don't pay for, whatever. Like for guys, I think like me, who are like super masculine, like I'll go to another guy's house and I'll like look at his tools.
And his wife, I assume. Like, wow, how'd you get that? No,
definitely. It's really weird. I have that one buddy that I make jokes about his wife being attractive and I'm going to steal his wife and stuff. And he's like, hey man, I don't think those are funny. And I'm like, I've said to him, he's one of my oldest friends. I've said to him, I don't care. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, what's wrong with you? And I put it on him and I just don't respect him for not thinking certain things are funny. Like, what do you even mean by that?
Maybe he's scared. Maybe he thinks you could steal his wife. Like,
that's
ridiculous.
That's ridiculous.
You don't know what she says to him. You don't know when you
Yes,
leave,
I do. I'm
like,
positive. I don't know exactly what she says to him, but I'm sure she says nothing to him about me at all. Ever.
You don't know that.
I'm
he could
positive.
have very, very reasonable insecurity based on like the way she looks at your ass as you walk out the door.
Nobody does it. No women have ever looked at.
No,
I do. I know. I've talked to all of them. Men do, but no women.
Men check out your ass, but no women. That's not a thing. If men are checking out your ass, there have been women who check out your ass too.
Yeah, women look at my ass and they say,
just way stealthier about it.
I think women look at my ass, but I think they then respond to themselves with, I'm not sure he's a full grown man. He has a boy like Heine.
So your butt is like your feet. Is there any part of you that's full grown? Are we going to go through one by one?
Yeah, my head.
And find out?
My head. I look like an old white person. Yes, I'm a bald, white bearded man.
Okay, so but man is still in there, not boy. You've still upgraded yourself here.
If I were just a face. All right, I don't know. This is absurd, but I love it. So I love just going way out to anywhere with you on this show. Okay, so what else did I want to talk with you about? Oh, I know that this was a really interesting story I wanted to mention. More abortion headlines, laws. It is in what state are we talking about? Guess what? Texas. Republican lawmaker in Texas, Republican, of course. He introduced a bill to allow the death penalty for women who have abortions. Now, where are you on abortion, Maura?
Well, I think they're great, but I'm in favor of this law. This makes sense to me.
You think women should be put to death. What are some of the other infractions you think people should receive death penalty?
I think if they're going to be killing women who have abortions, there's not going to be any women having abortions in a minute because they'll have eliminated all the men who jerk off. I assume they're getting the chair first. So once they're all dead.
Why would we get the chair?
Because you're killing sperm. You're just killing it. You're just letting it die.
No. When we create at the time of conception, the woman is the one who is in charge.
Aren't you conceiving of masturbating? I mean, I'm pretty sure that's.
I was just now while I was talking. There's no doubt about it.
Hey, was it you talking about how small your hiney is that really got you going? You're just like, I do have a boy's butt.
Yes, that was what it was. I was just talking about it. I was like, do we commit abortions with our expenditures?
Of course, this is absolutely ridiculous, and these people are out of control and insane. And the thing, though, that is fascinating is that they keep hitting up this issue when it's not an issue they have the same amount of support that they think they do on. I mean, even on the right, the majority of people believe that abortion should be legal. So it's these fringe groups just going out on their absolutely insane ideals and getting away with it way too often.
One of the things I wonder about is, I think you and I could both talk about issues that we've evolved on and so on, but can you evolve on the concept, the moral idea that a pregnancy as a result of a rape the woman should be forced to keep that baby as a result of it? They also generally include rape or incest in that. And I mean, have people changed their minds on that? But I used to be open to abortion for that reason. But now even rape or incest, because I think that's where they do what you just said. They go too far. I don't think people have a change on that, but I don't know.
I heard a podcast just the other week, but that was specifically about a woman who was very, very Christian, very, very pro-life, and who had a stillbirth, and she did not abort it, gave it the chance, but it could not survive when she gave birth to the child. And she was held up as this, look at this hero who, a pro-life hero within her church. And then she went through a bunch of other things, and she kept having the same sort of terrible experience and an awful pregnancy where doctors were telling her, look, this fetus is not going to survive. And, it's very traumatic to have a stillbirth pregnancy. And we suggest, that you abort at this point. And she started to talk to other women who were going through these types of things, and her whole view on abortion started to change. And I think people can evolve, and I don't, that's a very specific, this person had a very personal experience. But I know plenty of people as well who, especially those who were brought up in these sort of with these extreme pro-life positions, a lot of people, as they go through life and they recognize that it's just not as black and white, it's not as clear, they absolutely can evolve. I know it happens often.
All right, let me ask you one more thing about it is March is, I don't know if you knew this, it's like International Women's History Month. And
I've got all the banners up. We put out the lights. I mean, I started decorating, oh gosh, like forever ago. There's vaginas everywhere.
You hang like different kinds of vaginas on.
It's just Georgia O'Keeffe paintings as far as the eye can see in my house right now.
And then you take them down at the end of the month. So,
I mean, you don't want to impose too much.
My question is about Black History Month, Women's History Month, Veterans Day. In my case, seriously, like I'm hosting a podcast. I could use any theme, any St. Patrick's Day this week, whatever. You could jump out of anything. I'm not opposed to it. It just feels like you're doing something disproportionately in this case about like gender equity or racial equity or justice. And it's like, why am I just focused on it right now? I'm not judging either way, but like in terms of a programming choice, much less anybody who, it's not necessarily affected. I suppose they even use them, as for lessons in school, perhaps. But what are your thoughts on any of that? Is there any right or wrong way to do it?
Well, I mean, yes, you should be focusing on all of these things all the time. So, this is much more about sort of examining the work you've been doing and recognizing, hey, wait, have I been including these other perspectives that maybe are not my own? And we give you a month or whatever to uplift. And of course, that's kind of bullshit. It's not just talk to the ladies for the month and then shut them all down again. Like you can go on your merry way and let them know that their brain is smaller and they're not funny. But, for 1 month, we indulge their ramblings. You know how crazy they get if we don't.
Emotional.
That's not. Yeah. They just.
What do you think about that, by the way? The idea that women are too emotional for blank has always been befuddling to me because men are also too emotional, and that emotion is anger. And last week, who was it? The lady from Facebook, Lean In, Cheryl Sandberg. Is that her name? She said something extreme and offensive, which was, if women were in charge, there wouldn't be any wars. And whether it's Assad or Putin or George W. Bush or Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi, like she makes an interesting argument, sexist as it is. Thoughts on that?
No, of course. There definitely wouldn't be any wars. I mean, like not overt wars. All the words would be like really like passive aggressive. And, like Syria would be calling up Iran and be like, oh my God, did you see Algeria? That is embarrassing. She should be embarrassed. Let's not talk to her anymore. And then that would be like what sanctions are. Like, I mean, it's nonsense. It's bullshit. Like everyone has seen women fight the same way men fight. Now it's just like, we're just talking about what we've societally programmed, in my opinion. I mean, the like nature, the nurture, the biology, all of these things are questions. But I will say we definitely have a culture that has taught people, or a society that has taught men they're not supposed to have emotions, so they need to like swallow them. Turns out you can't really do that. So if you swallow emotions, you start getting really angry, and that's how that comes out. Whereas we have, taught that women need to be very like soft and emotionally expressive. But, ultimately, and this is the only place where maybe it becomes even minutely relevant, because we tell women that they have a lot of emotions, we have also started like recognizing you should deal with emotions. And so, I think that at this moment in our societal history, perhaps there are more women who are willing to figure out how to handle their emotions than there are men, because we've created a society where it's okay for women to look into that, and it's not as okay for men to look into that. But that's shifting, and it's very generalized, and it's pretty much nonsense all in all, in my emotional opinion. I am very, as you can hear from my very flat tone of voice, I'm incredibly worked up right now, Pete. I'm going to start crying in a second. I do cry all the time, but that's totally an aside.
Do you do you have the emotion of anger visit you as often as the emotions that we're talking about, sadness or crying? You know, women cry, men, you know, men's form of cry. Men cry. I cry a good bit, as a matter of fact, but like I yell more than I cry. It's like a lot of anger. What's the difference? I don't understand. What the exact
super
same?
Angry all the time, but I will say, like, okay, so I mean, I think I'm an interesting test case because there is something about maybe it is because society told me that women are like soft and weak and emotional that made me go, well, I don't want to be like that, and shut down on emotions in a lot of ways for a long time. And yeah, I was angry all the fucking time. Angry all the time. Or you could just say, I snap, right? Like I have a quick temper. I snap at people when, like, if you're someone who's close to me and you just said one little dumb thing, I respond with disproportionate anger. But no big deal. It's just how I am. Not a big thing. Then I started really trying to put time into like doing a lot more emotional work on myself. And, it turns out people don't like when you snap at them in anger. That's like not.
I've been told.
Yeah, no, I mean, I heard it. I heard it from plenty of people. And I was kind of like, oh, look, it's just a little quirk. Don't, I love you. Like, didn't really go over so well. And then I started putting a lot more time into trying to access the root emotion that I was feeling, recognize when, hey, this little thing that's going on is building up in me and I'm not expressing it. And maybe that's leading to me getting angry later. Like, so now I try very hard to be really in touch with my emotions. And now it turns out I cry all the time. I cry constantly and I snap hardly ever. But, was that because I was a dude and I became a woman? Like, to my knowledge, I haven't. To my knowledge, this, cis hetero lady is still a cis hetero lady.
What it sounds like I'm hearing is that females experience a wide range of emotions and deal with their psychological, they deal with their stuff. It sounds like what you're saying similarly to men. That's what it sounds like you're saying.
Anything men can do, I can do better is actually what I'm saying. I want to make that very clear.
We have just gotten if this is one of those podcasts that pulled like a quote out, we would have the time fairy. We have the time fairy, and anything I could do, anything men can do, I can do better. That was awesome for you to share. And really, I think that one of the most valuable things that you appear in here on the podcast regularly for people is they do kind of start to feel like they're your friend. But I think the great thing about your vulnerability and honesty and your confidence with which you communicate is that you give people, including me in that case, permission to validate their own experience and feelings. I think that's what you just did for me and others. So for that, we owe you, and I will leave it there. Thank you very much. That was funny and hilarious and thoughtful and had as many levels as it always does when I get to talk to you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Pete.
All right, there she goes, Maura Quint, everybody, at Behind Your Back on Twitter, and always a great conversation with her. And now for something really different for the day and for the show. I had this guy's former Congressman Doug Collins people reached out to me because he's launched a podcast, and the best thing you can do to promote your podcast is to go on other people's podcasts. And he is a lawyer and a retired congressman who served Georgia's 9th District from 2013 to 2021, a Republican Party, a huge supporter of former President Donald Trump, who also served in the Georgia House of Representatives from 2007. He served as a chaplain, still does, a chaplain in the U.S. Air Force Reserve. He deployed to Iraq in 2008. He's the rank of lieutenant colonel. He did run for U.S. Senate in 2020, but he finished in third place behind Raphael Warnock and the incumbent Republican Kelly Loeffler in their nonpartisan blanket primary. So he didn't even make the runoff there. But like I said, he's a former Baptist minister. He still practices that. And now he's doing the podcast. It's called The Doug Collins Podcast. You can find it everywhere podcasts are available. He is on Twitter at Rep. Doug Collins, where his bio described him as a husband, father, Air Force chaplain, Iraq veteran, attorney, fighting for conservative values. The Doug Collins podcast.com. We really got into it, but it was pretty pleasant. I'm not sure how much progress I made with him. I was disappointed to hear, obviously, a lot of his answers here, but I hope we'll continue the conversation and comes on again. And let me know what you guys think of this. Here he is, Doug Collins, right now. Oh, there he is, former Congressman Doug Collins, who is now invading the game of broadcasting and media. Why not just go back to your trade of lawyering, or you were a Baptist minister, you're a chaplain? Why must you come into our space and take our audiences from us, sir?
Oh, look, Pete, I can no way I can take y'all's audiences. Look, we're just out there sharing, our thoughts. I think it's a way to stay involved for me. I'm still in the ministry. In fact, I've got a wedding. Before we started talking today, I was finishing up a wedding that I'm doing this weekend. I'm still in the Air Force as a chaplain. Hit 20 years last week. So I've been in the Air Force 20 years. I went to Iraq, and so I still have that ministry part of it. But there was one thing that I really wanted to stay involved, because I felt, from my perspective, a conservative voice needs to be there. That is a practical conservative voice that says, look, I'm not going to back down on who I am and what I believe, but I also believe, as I did in Congress, that you try to get things done. And we had a record of getting things done. So I think I provide that sort of a mix, and more than just politics. One of the things I was wanting to emphasize is this a whole just sort of lifestyle that we hunt, we fish, we listen to music, we do those kind of things. And just, to give people more broadband sort of just who they are and from that perspective.
So let's find out who you are. I always like to get to know people, no matter who, or what they do. And you've obviously had a fascinating life. I mean, but I guess I couldn't find out a lot about, like, your childhood, your upbringing. I'm sure you've written about it and talked about it. I just didn't prepare well enough. And I thought it'd be easier for you to just tell me, like, what drove you into law school or the ministry or Congress? Like, who are you? Like, what motivated you? What was your life like as a child?
My dad was a Georgia State Trooper. He retired after 31 years. So I grew up as a trooper's kid here in Gainesville, Georgia, where I grew up. My mom worked some outside the home, but she then went back when I was in high school and went and started working with senior adults in the what we knew as the Area Agency on Aging down here. These were where senior adults would come during the day. They would do, they'd have programs, crafts. They'd eat a meal together. They did a lot of things together. My mom was one of the folks that saw that program for many counties. So I saw mom and dad both from a perspective of service, and it was not necessarily political service. In fact, I did not come from a quote political family. When I first ran for office, almost 17 years ago now, back in the mid 2000s, I didn't come with one who has already had it paid for me. In fact, that was something that was abnormal, not abnormal, but my dad being a trooper, it was political internally, but it wasn't a political outside job. And my mom's, she worked for a government agency. So I came up with that kind of upbringing.
I just want to clear up. You said you didn't come from a place where your political path was paved for you. You didn't say paid.
Yeah, no, it's paid. It wasn't paved. It wasn't paid either, for that matter.
I'm sure, but I just want to make...
No, it wasn't paved. So it was one that I came into mainly through college. I got involved in politics when I was in college. And it was something that I enjoyed, because I've always believed that government... I still have this sort of Mr. Smith goes to Washington ideal of Washington, and that it is the place that our founders put forth that we can get things done. And it's not easy. There are going to be differing ideas. You have to find common ground and you have to move forward. But I just believed in that concept. But along the way, it didn't always go as planned. I thought I was going to go to law school coming out of college, and that didn't work out. That was back in a time, if some of the listeners may remember, L.A. law was very popular, and you had doctors and everybody leaving to go to law school. Well, I didn't get in where I wanted and didn't do that. So I went, we got married. My wife and I got married. We've been married since 1988. And I had to go work. I went out and got into business, and then answered a call, which was in my heart that I had known. I was just sort of letting it go. And that was ministry. And I went into ministry, started as a youth pastor. Then I started pastoring a church a little bit later on called Chicopee Baptist Church. I pastored there for 11 years. Still one of the greatest honors in my life is to lead a group of people of faith and they know you as Pastor Doug. And that's how I still look back on those days with fondness, even though the church ministry is very difficult. But also then felt later I'm from the North Georgia mountains, so my life is sort of like a mountain road. As another curve, I felt God saying, okay, this time had ended. It was time to move into another phase. And that's when I went back to law school at 38 years old. My first day of class was I was turning 38 years old. I was in a classroom of about 80 people, most of them under 25. Here I was, 38. They were playing on their laptops and shopping and everything else. And I was just trying to figure out how to type and make sure that I was keeping up with the notes. So did that, and an office came open in my hometown for a state house while I was in law school. My second year law school, I ran, I won. I finished law school in 3 years while I was in the state house. And then, a little bit later, redistricting came in 2012. I ran for the U.S. Congress, and sort of that's where you got me. So I came from a really basic, middle class, lower middle class background, and just always believed in my dreams. You worked hard enough, you get there.
Do you think that's true of like most Americans, that if you work hard enough, you'll succeed, or is it? Do you think it's more nuanced than that?
I think it's always nuanced. Where you come from. I mean, there's your background. I was very blessed to have a very stable home. My mom and my dad were very supportive of my brother and I growing up. That my dad coached us. We had a good background to come from. And so I think, there's always the differences in, backgrounds and personalities where you come from. But I do still believe that this is the country that is still possible. And, again, you don't know unless you get out there and try.
Do you think that people generally have like similar opportunity in America?
And generally, yes.
You do?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a difference between the word blessed and privileged? You said you're blessed to be from the great family that you came from.
Privilege. I mean, again, if you want to take details down from a perspective, if we want to break the two words down, privilege means, I think again, in how you wanted to take it, I'm not going to assume how you would take it or anybody else would take it, is that you had an advantage over somebody else or something that was not available in general. Yeah. Blessed in a general sense, from a faith perspective. I'm frankly, and I use the word, which I don't, it's sort of interesting that you should catch on that, because I don't use that word very often at all. In the sense of there is this idea, and I saw this as pastoring, and I'll use an example for you.
Sure.
How many times have you ever went to, in your faith, you have something good happens or something bad happens. It may be, or Mother's Day, Father's Day, these kind of things. And everybody is, for the most part celebrating that day. But then you have someone who, like myself, 3 years ago, lost my mom, who died. So that first Mother's Day without my mom, everybody else was happy celebrating mom. I was remembering my mom. So I think, was I blessed in both regards, if you would? I had my mother, and then I have the memories of my mother. That is a blessing. I think to distribute the two is making maybe a narrative change that I just, I'm not sure I go with.
I look at it much simpler, meaning like if you're lucky enough to be born into a stable family, I'd be more specific. You've got two parents, maybe even better, they both went to college. Even better, they own a home. Maybe better, neither of them are addicts or, have serious mental issues. Like, to me, that seems like, wow, you got lucky to be born in this family. Therefore, you have a privilege that someone that was born into another situation, another, maybe a more impoverished community, something didn't have. Is that?
Well, you may have. And look, I see it from, from how your ideological perspective, but also, I have a lot of friends who grew up with, a divorced home where they understood it, including my own wife. So,
sure.
And my family never went to college. So I was on my, from my marriage perspective, except for my uncle was the first to go to college in my family.
So tell me a little bit about that your religious beliefs. I don't know, I'm from the Northeast, so we don't have a lot of Baptist church up here. So I'm pretty ignorant as to what, is there major difference between Baptists and other Christianity? Do you see yourself different from other Christians? Isn't it really, from what little I read about it on the church used to minister at ChickapooBaptistChurch.com about the ministry and what the efforts are? How would you describe your beliefs and what you preach from the pulpit?
Well, number one, I have no idea what right now is. I've been gone from Chicopee since 2005. So whatever's on their website right now, I probably would agree with, but I don't have any idea what
it says we support Joe Biden, which I was really surprised.
Yeah, come on, Pete. No, look, faith to me is very simple. One of the things, and I'll use it this way, faith is that, from my perspective, outliving faith is I believe that Jesus Christ came, born of a virgin, died on the cross for my sins, was raised 3 days later, and that offers that forgiveness of sin through faith in Christ. That's the basic, understanding of Christianity, which I think is shared, in a sort of a universal sense in that regard. And so for me, it is, it's what the old version and what it was says, and when it was first out, was the way or following the way of following of Christ is as best you can. So it's that I think without getting into, the theological differences between Baptists and Methodists and Presbyterians and Catholics, which I'm not going to spend time doing, it's just it's the simple faith in Christ and living that faith as you believe you're led to.
So, so that leads me to the big question when your folks reach out to me and say, hey, would you want to talk to Doug Collins? And I obviously follow your career in Congress. I watched you during the impeachment hearings and a lot of media appearances and so on. And I thought, I'd love to talk to someone like him because he's, a very devoutly religious guy. And I've always wanted to understand. He's also a huge supporter of Donald Trump. And I don't get the opportunity to ask people enough about that. That's the thing that confuses me the most. I could talk to you about so many different things, but I think to me, that's something that makes it such a hard thing to understand, because the way that I see Donald Trump and the way that so many other people see Donald Trump is that he's just an awful, terrible, completely unprincipled, immoral person who cheated on his wife with a porn star while she was pregnant, and his other wives as well. Abusive, dishonest, corrupt, didn't pay his vendors. All of the people that worked for him, many of the people that worked for him, hate him, and including his own family members, it would seem. And I just wonder, how can you support him? What was it about him that a guy like you, who's as principled as you say you are, could then support him?
Well, I think you support it. This is a president and we were supporting policies, especially when we come to the issue of what was going on from the White House in the Congress and getting things actually done. I'm never going to and never have. And you can look at this. I've never supported, the immoral acts or anything else that is attributed to anyone else. I think when you come to the position that we were in Congress and supporting the roles and policies that were coming from the administration, that's what was, my main focus in looking at this. And also, seeing it from a perspective of that I'm never going to agree, like he would never agree with, or anybody, or you and I would agree on our different lifestyles, but we also can come together to agree, here's some things that I believe are better for the country. And that's really where, from my focus was in the time that I was in Congress looking at. And then you can have some things, and you mentioned the impeachment, that you just simply say, whatever else you felt about this at that time, the impeachment was just wrong. And the way it went about and the way it happened was just a wrong, idea. So I came across very, adamantly and said many times during the impeachment that no matter which president, Republican, Democrat, anybody else, the way we went about that was just completely wrong. And it didn't do our country justice.
Yeah, I want to get to that, but I'm still hung up because I feel like you didn't clear it up. So for me, it's again, like if I'm going to support someone for town council, mayor, congressman, or president, the most important thing to me is their character. What kind of moral character do they have? Because Donald Trump has, in many people's opinions, many Americans' opinions, certainly a lot of religious folks, no moral character. Like he's a terrible person and he's assaulted dozens of women sexually. He has stolen from people, not paid vendors, destroyed people actively, rhetorically, destroyed their lives, their livelihoods. How can you possibly, before you get the policies, how is that not the most important thing for mayor, governor, any office?
Well, I think from the, again, I'm not, going to go down the line in which we're obviously going to disagree here, in which we're not, going to come to an understanding. Again, my support here, it came to a commonality of policies, which, again, those other lifestyles he has to answer for. That is from a faith perspective. You ask about faith perspective. We all have to answer for what we have done outside of that. And as we come forward, Donald Trump, you, me, everybody else will have to answer for that.
I understand that. I understand that. But at some point, a person is so terrible, you can't look past. I mean, what redeeming character qualities do you think that he has? How could you support him?
Well, I saw here's the interesting thing is there's no one, and I disagree firmly in that there's not redeemable qualities.
What are they?
In anybody.
What are his?
Well, here's my deal. When you look at someone who came to the office and when I look at what he was trying to do, when I listened to him, I actually talked with him and actually looked at how we were trying to, that was, the goal of making lives better. I do believe he actually, between the issues and other things in his life, when he got to the White House, he actually wanted to make a difference. And there were things that we actually worked on that I do believe made a difference. Pete, we can look and continue down a path. I'm not going to defend his prior actions. I'm not going to defend, what he did. I am going to defend the fact that we did work together and he did put some things in place in the White House and work to help people. Right. I'll just leave it at that.
Let me just ask you one more specific question on his character. What evidence do you have that he ever did or even said anything that showed that he cared about other people, that he was doing something? Because sometimes he would do things and people would argue, see, he's a good person. And you would always be able to trace it back to it benefited him. What do you think he said or did that was actually a good? I mean, this is a pretty softball question, I guess, but he was so mean and so terrible and so dishonest to everybody around him, his close circle, much less in his whole career, long before he became president. I mean, almost everybody.
Well, I think, and to sort of tie this in a knot, because, continuing just to go around and around here, we're not going to get anywhere. But I will tie this in a knot and say this is, look, when I talked to him and we did talk and he would ask about, I'll give an example of, time in Georgia when we had a hurricane hit. And he was genuinely concerned about how is the federal government, how is the government actually helping those that are in need. I remember, he's asked what he was interesting enough, which is never reported. He also was very good at remembering people and names and having a genuine concern. There were several times that I had talked to him because I would be in the White House or not. He would ask, I have a daughter who has spina bifida. He would ask about Jordan. He would ask about my wife. And again, there are things when you look at the overall perspective, he, keeping that list when he would ask questions about criminal justice reform, which, hopefully we'll talk about. There was a genuine concern about is the state of our criminal justice system actually helping or is it hurting? And I think so in little areas like that and those bigger areas, I believe there was compassion. Do I always agree with his tactics? No, in fact, said so. But at the same point in time, you ask a question, there's an answer on how I actually saw that he did care away from the spotlights, away from everything, or even when it was never reported. All right.
Do you believe the women who accused him of assaulting him?
That I have no reason to doubt them. They have all made their case. That is out there and for the public to deal with.
Okay, let's talk about criminal justice, but one more Trump-related question. Maybe they can get us into it. And I still always kind of ask everybody this, what made him famous politically? I was on the Celebrity Apprentice. I lived in New York. I knew of Donald Trump, about Donald Trump, was close to Donald Trump in terms of literally being in similar spaces with him at a couple of events. I mean, I knew his whole thing, I think, pretty well, but the thing that really made him famous was the whole birther thing. I know we're going way back, Doug, but I do, that's the thing. Do you think that was a racist thing to believe that Obama wasn't born here?
I think I would disagree with that. I would never say that. In fact, I even talked about the fact that it is. So he said it. Ask him. You know him. Ask him. Okay.
I don't know him.
From my perspective, I think it was, again, as you said, knowing him, he put it out there. He put out something that was controversial. It brought attention, especially at that time. But, as far as from my perspective, that was never a question in my mind on where President Obama, was born or anything else. My problem with President Obama was his policies. Sure. That's a whole different issue.
So let's talk about policies and let's talk about, when it comes to criminal justice, it's hard to get around the issue of race. So how do you define racism in this country against black people? What's a racist law that we have or have had in the past?
I've got one that has a racial disparity problem that right now Congress could fix. It's called the Equal Act, and that is the differentiation between crack cocaine and powdered cocaine. We actually lowered that threshold to 18-1 from 100-1 in the First Step Act. We saw the disproportionate impact it was having on minority communities. And now there's a bill that is passed out of the House, bipartisan support. It's in the Senate. It's being held up for political reasons that would just basically do away with that disparity in that. So that's one way we saw it. It's first started, if you remember how it first started, was we saw the impact back then, which I was not a part of at the time. The policymakers saw what was happening with crack cocaine in minority neighborhoods. They wanted to eradicate it. The only way they thought they could eradicate it was make it in some way worse of a crime, and
right.
over time has just not proved that to be true. So I think those are the ways. What we're seeing as we go forward is how do we affect communities in the criminal justice system, in the criminal justice sphere of what we have.
Do you think that the law is, well, all right, let's talk more about criminal justice reform, because it's something that you certainly wanted to talk about with me. It's an issue that I've been talking about as long as I've been on the air, talking to criminal justice experts. Do you think that, by the way, does your religion kind of inform you on criminal justice when it comes to redemption and forgiveness?
Yes, very much so. And I think this is one of the things that I've been asked about, many times, because when I was practicing law, which I did practice law for a while, I don't practice law, really that much anymore. But one of the things I did is I did have criminal defense work that I did. And I remember being asked about, how can you defend people who have been charged, with a crime and walking them through. And I had a friend at the time who had made a statement. I sort of made the statement my own because I really thought what he said was very apropos. And you ask about a faith background, and what it came out to be is how can I not stand with somebody if Christ stood with me on my worst day? How could I not stand with somebody else on their worst day?
Yeah.
And I think the part that we have to deal with in our criminal justice, Pete, and I think we both can agree on this, is there have to be equal outcomes. There has to be that for those being charged, no matter their background, color, and where else, if you come into our criminal justice system, there needs to be a fairness about that you are innocent till proven guilty, that you have adequate counsel provided, and that you have prosecutors who play by the rules, if you would, in making sure that justice is dispensed. And at the same time, then I'm going to take it a step further. Past the court, most of us forget it past the sentencing time. But we, from people of faith, and also I think both conservatives and liberals can understand that our biggest problem we're having right now from the mass incarceration, and it is a large incarceration population we have in this country, is when they start transitioning out or they get out. 95% of all individuals who go to jail will come home at some point. Now, think about that a second. 95% will come home. Most people have this thought of they go to jail, you never see them again. That's not true. So the question is, though, are we preparing them when they come back to just recycle back in, or are we actually giving them hope to say that they can find a skill, look at the addictions that they may have, whether it be drug, or they have mental health issues, or they have skill issues? We've got to be a part of that. And that, I believe, is not just a government issue. It's a faith-based issue as well.
Well, we have more people in prison than any country in the world per capita. Why do you think that is? Why is that? We have more bad Americans?
Go ahead. No, I think it's we've bought in both Republicans and Democrats over the years bought into the line that, again, and what it came out as a disproportionate sense, that if we're mad at you or we're trying to change it, that the harsher the sentence. And we started seeing that. And then we would go out and sell it in the political sphere as we're keeping our streets safe. And it bought. You don't believe, and this is it's not a Republican only issue. In fact, it was the crime bill in the early 90s that Joe Biden actually took most credit for, that was basically saying we're going to get all these people off the streets. And when we started back in the First Step Act, when we started looking at some of this, we were frankly having to overcome even a 30-year-old law. It's a bipartisan issue. Mandatory minimums were a part, taking judges' discretion, but also prosecutorial discretion is also another big issue here.
Yeah, but to be clear, it's a conservative idea that Democrats like Joe Biden and the Clintons bought into. But those are conservative ideas.
Well, it's conservative in the sense, though. Well, but if you look at it, even from Democrats in the South, I mean, here's my problem and here's really an issue that we have right now is the conservative ideas work because politically it worked. I mean, Joe Biden and Clinton and many of the Democrats who voted for it in the Senate back then, I don't think you would call some of those, necessarily, conservative or liberal. I'd never call Joe Biden a conservative.
No, but what it sounds like you're saying is the conservative ideas work to get people elected. It sounds like you're saying these are political ideas and messages, but it resulted in mass incarceration, which now you're trying to fix.
I am as well. And again, let's be very frank here. This political idea had Republican and conservative tentacles to it. You can call it a conservative idea, which I can grant you, a conservative, more tough on crime approach.
Yeah.
But when people's homes and things are being broken into, this is an issue. The problem we're having now, and this is what I think gets in the way of criminal justice reform actually moving forward and taking it for what criminal justice reform is, and especially getting into our courts, getting into our sentencing. And that is criminal justice reform. Matthew Charles is a man who was incarcerated for drugs and possession and others. And he was the first one who was released under the First Step Act, which I and Hakeem Jeffries actually co-authored and wrote that Donald Trump signed into law. He was the first one released. I asked him on my podcast, I said, Matthew, describe for me what you believe criminal justice reform or what criminal justice should be. I said, because there's a lot of ideas out there. Some are saying that, we shouldn't prosecute, that there should be, diversions, no bail, all this stuff. He said, Doug, here's the issue. He said, proper criminal justice should mean that the punishment meets the crime in the sense of there is proportionality. And so I think when you look at our system right now, I think that we have gotten off center of that proportionality.
I love talking to you about all these issues, none of which I think we probably agree on. But I think that it's like what's happening is, if you could believe it or not, Doug, it seems like we're having a civil conversation. We
are. I mean, if we don't have these conversations, look, Pete, we're not going to, take each other and, convert us each in this picture. But we do have to have civil conversations about this. This is the one thing, if you were to ask me, Doug, what is the one thing that disturbs me about the political discourse on both sides right now, is that at the end of the day, there's much more reward politically in being apart than there was coming together. And I spent a lot of time in Congress, had 19 pieces of legislation that actually got signed under both President Obama and President Trump, then which had joint Democrat-Republican support for, and not just criminal justice reform. We did Music Modernization Act, which rechanged how people get their music that they get now, streaming services, and how songwriters and others are actually getting a fair market on a 100-year-old law. We did intellectual property aspects. Those are kind of things, though, that are big things that are not the headline items that you just got to get in there and work. And with the rhetoric of the time, we're not getting that done further. But I'm glad you and I had this conversation.
Do you think you contributed to the negative rhetoric at all?
We always do. I mean, there's parts that I say that you say that everybody contributes. The question is can we walk back and say, okay, what do we need to do now?
Yeah, I definitely do. But I'm just a jackass with a show. You're a congressman, and it feels like there's more responsible for ability for the principal of the school, the mayor, and the congressman, the amount of influence that your rhetoric obviously has. All right. Last question, and I really appreciate it, which is, it feels like there's this very binary belief now that Democrats, liberals, progressives believe and support in democracy for America and around the world. And conservatives and Republicans believe more in authoritarianism, autocracy, or something other than theocracy, other than democracy, in that conservatives overturned a free and fair election, the votes of the people, and are making it harder to have a healthy democracy where voting should be really, really easy. And it's something America's always been really good at. What do you say? I know that I'm sure you have a lot to say about this, but what do you say of that binary that it certainly seems like Republicans support not only something that isn't traditional democracy in the U.S., but they support other leaders who also support that, like Orban and Putin and Bolsonaro and others?
Well, number one, you're not talking to one that you're classifying in that group. Dictators are thugs. Okay, plain and simple. Also,
but Trump supported all those guys.
I'm going to go back to your previous question on civil discourse and civility. When you break down the binary question, this is not a binary question. The question comes down to an honest, look at how do we make sure that our vote in our elections are safe and they're secure and people. I want everybody to vote. If you're out there and you're of eligible age, and you go through the rules, you register to vote, go vote.
Then why in Georgia make it?
One of the problems I see in America is we don't have enough people that actually use that sacred right of voting.
But for instance, in the Georgia laws, my understanding, they're specifically making it hard for likely Democrats to vote like souls at the polls. Black people have always gone together to vote after church, and you made a new law that said they couldn't do that.
That's not true. They can still vote on Sundays. The counties can still vote on Sundays. That's just not true. That's the problem with the Georgia law and the reflexive action about it. There's Saturday voting, there's Sunday voting. That is not, that's just not part of it.
Oh.
So, again, we don't have much time, but this is why rhetoric matters. This is why the facts matter. And that's just not, like I said, that's just not a true statement. In fact, it's easier to vote and you have more opportunities to vote in Georgia than you do Delaware.
It says, the Washington Post says, new Georgia legislation curbs souls to the polls is the headline that I looked up. But you're saying that there's nothing in this.
Reading the bill, it's not what it says.
OK, well, listen. If you want more of what Doug is got, listen to his podcast. And I hope that you'll come back and talk with me. And I think it's really important that we talk to each other. I've always believed that. And I think that we had a great talk. And I hope you feel, I was fair-minded with you.
I think, Pete, it's a good conversation. We're not going to agree on everything. And that, that's life. I don't agree with, everybody all the time.
Do you believe aliens exist? Did you see anything in Congress?
Now, Pete, you finally got to a question that we want to talk about.
Top secret.
Isn't it something simple-minded? That's the one question. UFOs exist. I didn't see anything in Congress. We'll just have to see. But it is sort of interesting that can we sit here and I think you want to get into a true existential question.
Sure.
Is if we actually, and we can't have nowhere close, time to, is if there, if there is life out there, then how do we relate to it and where are we in the process? That's always an interesting question.
Doug Collins, everybody. A pleasure to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Pete, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right, I hit stop. Thank you very much, man.
All right, man.
I really appreciate it. Let's do it again whenever you want.
All right, Pete, it was a good time. Like I said, you in the middle of the thing, I think one of the things we hit on is that we can disagree. Most people don't realize that Hakeem Jeffries and I are actually good friends. Hakeem, of course, leads the Democrats now. If they, take the majority, or if they keep the majority, or they take the majority at some point, Hakeem's probably going to be speaker.
Thank you.
We would disagree on most every issue, just like you and I would, as far as the bigger picture. But where we found commonality, we actually worked together. And First Step Act was interesting. He would come with me sometimes to more conservative-leaning think tanks or institutions that were helping us. And I would go to the liberal think tanks and others. And it was a really amazing picture to see he and I together, who totally disagreed on most things, could come together and actually get stuff done. I actually think that's what the founders intended.
Well, regardless of what you guys did or what the founders intended, it's certainly healthy for the public to hear conversations like this. And, I think what podcasting allows and what new media allows is that you don't have to worry about ratings. And, being out of office gives you, a freer, I feel like, mandate to talk about things. And, it's just it's a totally different space as opposed to cable news, which I grew up in. So
I understand that.
And
I understand
Congress.
that. Well,
right,
cool,
man,
I'm sure at some point we'll get back together, and I appreciate it.
Anytime you want. Thanks a lot, Doug.
Take care. See you.
Bye. All right, there he goes, at Rep Doug Collins, the DougCollinsPodcast.com. And I want to know what you think of that. Would you like me to have him back? Other folks, former Republican congressman at any level? What do you think? Always interested in your ideas, compliments, criticisms. Let me know. standupwithpete@gmail.com. Support this podcast right now with a paid subscription because while it's free, it is not cheap. I work really hard on it every day. The most comprehensive news recap, 2 great guests each and every day. And you're always a producer, and a lot of people have become real good friends. So thank you very much for supporting the podcast. Standupwithpete.com or patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Tell your friends, give it a review, and that's it. Time to go. I will talk to you tomorrow and try to be the change that you want to see. I love you guys. John Carroll taking us out right now.
Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color stand our ground, and then stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw the land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the